Hello, I think we are live, and I am also confused as, oops. Hello guys, I think we're live, and I'm also, oh right, there we are. The stream is a bit behind my thing. Hey everyone, welcome, how are you doing? Hope we're all having a good morning. Presuming you're in the UK, or if you're watching this elsewhere, that's cool. So, what I'm doing in this stream, I'm literally just going to be studying Beowulf. Before I do, I'm going to have some music in the background. People can, if they object, if they don't like it, just let me know and I'll turn it off or turn it down, like whatever. It's my favorite artist as it happens, and I know the guy personally, so I encourage you guys to check out his music on his Bandcamp page. It's like, I just really love his albums, they're great stuff. So there's a link to his album there, and also this is my sort of, I guess, attempt to ward off perhaps any YouTube copyright strikes. I haven't gotten copyright strikes before from using his music in my videos because, again, he knows me personally and he's not going to do a copyright strike, but whatever. This is how it is. Pardon me. Salve Von. How chiebam quia lingvam latinam loqui potueris. My brain is, for some reason, I'm quite tired this morning. Slow wake up, and I'm not able to fully blast into Latin like I normally would. So I'm going to be annotating Beowulf, and there is the documents that you guys can follow along and leave any commentary if you want to. And let's just dive into it. Oh, I'll also load up YouTube chat on my phone so I can watch while you guys. I can see your guys' comments. Forgive me, guys. I'm just very tired this morning. My brain is still waking up, but hopefully, with the power of some good old Beowulf, we can wake up. And speaking of, can anybody? Well, these are the famous first lines, right? Hwatwe gardena in yerdagum feorkinninga thrumifrunon huda atherlingas elin frimedon of Jild shaving shed natraetum moniga maithum meotetla opteach edge erl sidan aras werd verschaft funden. So nice. Yeah, Vaughan, I've had my second cup of coffee. I normally limit myself to two. Oh man, honestly, it's because yesterday I had 2 energy drinks instead of 2 coffees, and it's a bit more than normal, and so I'm having a come down from that today. But anyway, so these lines, oops, goodness, clumsy me. I should, before I do that, actually, I should probably explain the gloss that I have. So, because I don't know how much familiarity with Old English you guys have. So Old English, as you may know, has 4 cases. Really, they have a nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. Now, don't worry too much about, oh, what do these words mean, nominative, accusative. Just think about them in terms of they do different things. So in modern English, as you can see from the sample sentences I've given here, we communicate the information by where a word is in the sentence. But in Old English, they don't. They indicate it by changing the ending. And because of that, words can go in any order in the sentence. And in Beowulf, they often do, because Beowulf is poetry. So what I'm going to be doing in this stream, for the most part, is going through these verses that I've laid out for the first couple of chapters and putting in the colours like this, according to my scheme. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone wants to, if anyone has any about Beowulf for what I know. I should note I'm not, a massive expert on Beowulf. There's just been so much scholarship written about it that I can't possibly, have read much of it. And it's also not my area of study. So I'll do a translation first, these first couple of lines. So Hwatwe gardena in yerdagum feorkinninga is, so we gardena is like we of the Spear Danes. In yerdagum, so yer is like your, and dagum is like days. So it's like in days of yore, right? Feorkinninga So this word kunning, we may be familiar with. It's sort of the kings. And then thrym is the might, the glory, the greatness of these kings. Yefrunon is we learned or we found out. So may we or we found out, the Speardanes, of the glory of the people kings in days of yore. So it's a really complicated word order here. Hura athalingas ellen fremedon. How the princes achieved a noble deed or accomplished a noble deed. Oft shield shaving shiadna threatum monogum maithum meotetla ofteach. So the verb here is ofteach, which means sort of take away. And the person who's doing it is yellow, shield shaving. Generally in this, the person who's doing the verb is going to be yellow. So shield shaving took away. And this blue bit here is what he is doing. So threatum is with threats, and sheadana is of, well, literally of shaders, but of enemies. So what they're saying is that shield shaving took away with threats of the enemies. Monogam maithum, and that's like from many. Monogam maithum is like many people, many kinsmen. Meodzetla, he took away the, what's the word for, the mead seats. Meodo is mead, and setla is literally like settle, it's like a seat. Ed Sod Earl, he sort of terrified the earls. Certain artist where Verschaft funden, since first creation was discovered, basically. Oh no, sorry, I'm wrong. Sorry, not Verschaft. Since afterwards, after he was at first destitute. So this, they're telling of shield shaving, who is this like self-made man, basically. He came from nothing, he was poor, and he became very powerful, and he was able to terrify the other earls, and he sort of took the mead seats away from many. So Tom Shippey has a great video series on YouTube going over Beowulf, and he talks about the cultural significance of these mead seats. One thing also I'm going to show you guys is the electronic Beowulf, and I'll post that in the comments, in the chat as well. So the electronic Beowulf is an amazing resource for studying the Old English poem. You can click here to listen to the first 3 lines read aloud, and you have an option here where you can have all sorts of apparatuses. And Brian, yeah, we're going from the start. There's a couple of things that I might skip to within the poem, because I've highlighted some, I've sort of annotated already some of my favorite ones. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through like the blank ones like this and putting the colors in to show how the grammar works of Beowulf, and also to translate it, put the vocabulary in on the side. What, yeah. But for a couple of them, I've already annotated them, like, I believe it's chapter 5. One of my favorite parts of Beowulf, because it's really interesting. So I got into an argument in YouTube comments with some guy about toxic masculinity in Beowulf. He has a poem on this. And one of my favorite parts of Beowulf is this speech by a Hunferth. It says here, Hunferth, Mathalode Ejlaf's Bern. Hunferth spoke Ejlaf's child. And then they're talking about, and then he goes into this long speech, essentially going at Beowulf when they arrive, when he arrives in the hall. And I find it really interesting. So he asks, þú se Beowulf, sethe with brechan wunne, on sidne sa in sund flytte, thar vit for volentje wada gunnidon, on for doljippe on del watter aldrum nedon. So, actually, before I tell you what this means, I don't know how good your guys' Old English vocab is, but I've got it all on the side. Does anyone want to attempt to translate any of this, or even just parts of it, like þú se Beowulf, with the vocabulary on the side? Anyone want to have a stab at translating it themselves? I mean, that's what the glass is meant to facilitate, I suppose. Earthus Beowulf sede with brechan wunne, on sidna sa sunflitte, tharit for lentje wada kunidon, on for doljip on del water aldrum nedon. Oh, sorry, Michael, that's okay. So, Michael, we're examining, because I think it might have been you who said that if it weren't for Beowulf's toxic masculinity, like, we wouldn't have killed the dragon. Yes, Brian, exactly. Eart Fuse Beowulf is are you? That's Beowulf, and it's one of the reasons why I think like studying Beowulf and just Old English poetry in general is so cool, because a lot of, I don't know, this is for me cultural heritage that really matters. Like I don't know, just the feeling of it. Like, are you that Beowulf? This is word order. These are phrases that we might say today. Are you that guy who did X, Y, Z? And for me, it's just so cool looking back and like, wow, 1,500 years ago, they were speaking the same way we are as native English speakers. It's wild to me. And so, Vaughan, you don't need, like, it's not about being good or bad. And also, I'm really terrible at this. I have to cheat and use the electronic Beowulf all the time. Trust me. Do not feel like you can't give it a go. What about this next bit? Seve with Brechan Wune. So, Ertus Beowulf is are you that Beowulf? And then Seve with Brechan Wune. Brecha is just like a dude. Brecca, and I think his name might mean trousers. I'm not certain. The names are quite weird. I mean, Beowulf, if I'm remembering correctly, according to most philological interpretation, just means bee-wolf, as in like a bee and a wolf together. It's weird. And about the name Beowulf, so it's rare in Old English literature. There's not many names called Beowulf. There is one attestation in a charter somewhere of like an actual person from early medieval England called Beowulf. So that's interesting to know. It's also interesting to know because so Beowulf, although it's written in Old English, the poem is set in Denmark, right, and in Scandinavia. So that person's got a sort of Viking name in early medieval England. It's quite interesting. I mean, there's lots of people like that, but it's quite interesting. So okay, let's talk about this. So let's talk about high masculinity. So one is related to win or won. That's interesting. Brian, let's look it up because I do not know this stuff too well. So we will look up. I mean, Wiktionary isn't always perfect, but well, it might be Wunian. Wunian, that's the one. Oh no, that's wait. Wait, who struggled? Let me have a look at the electronic Beowulf, because this is how I cheat with the electronic Beowulf, is I use the definition and grammar. So it shows up. So when you highlight definition and grammar on this menu, and you hover over a word, it'll show you the technical dictionary definition and the case it's in. So that tells me everything I need to know to colour it in. So that's why I'm saying that I fully cheated with it. So Brechan Wune, let me see. Brechan Wune. Wune. Oh, Winan. Yeah, okay, there's the past tense. Winan. So it had that mutation that we normally have. So from Proto-West Germanic Winan and then from Proto-Germanic Winana to strive. So wait, no. Michael, you are correct. Or sorry, no, Brian, you're correct. At least according to Wiktionary, which seems to be referenced with etymological dictionaries. Winan does seem to be related to winning, so that's a really good way to remember it, actually. So it's like, you win something by struggling. So in that case, are you the Beowulf? Say there with Brechan Wune would be something like that Beowulf, and notice, right? So So first of all, we have the article repeated, se, which is like the, basically, or it can mean that. So are you that Beowulf? And then they repeat it to know that we're talking about the same person. That one, because the yellow word is the one that's going to be doing the thing. So it's se who is doing the wune, which is sort of struggled. But we know in this case that se is actually Beowulf. So, are you the Beowulf, that Beowulf who struggled? Exactly, Matthew, the one who struggled with Brecha. Nice one. Did I... So, Yvonne, so I didn't remove chapter 6 with Simon. I'm actually editing it to like increase his volume. I'll post it like probably sometime today or tomorrow. I promise I won't like just delete it, don't worry. So yeah, he's actually I think he's been deleted from YouTube for a week. He told me because a video that he sent was like very, what's the word, unmeritoriously flagged as medical misinformation, at least from what he's told me about the video. I think people have been very hypersensitive about the risk of medical misinformation, perhaps understandably because of COVID. But anyway, so Matthew, yes, exactly right. Say that with Brecha and Wune is that man who struggled with Brecha. Now note that the word with can mean with or against, depending on the case, but whatever. And so, on sidna sa sund flytte. Now, so flytte is our verb here, and it's you contended, and it needs a yellow word to govern it. So that yellow word is going to be se. So Beowulf, you who contended, flytte, and on sidna sa sund. So this is a bit weird. When you have on and the accusative case, it means on to. So a literal translation would be you who sort of contended onto the deep sea concerning the ocean, sund. I'm trying to think of a good way to, I guess, put this into an idiomatic translation. So are you that Beowulf who fought or contended with Brecha? You who sort of set out onto the broad sea and contested about, what's the word? About the ocean, concerning the ocean, or around the ocean, perhaps. So, thar yit for Valencia wada kunidon. Thar is just like, that is just where. Yit is actually a very old English pronoun. So English used to have what's called a dual. So you could express exactly two of one thing. So in English we have you, and you can mean multiple you or just like a single you. And we used to have fu for a single you. Old English has fu as well, like we see earlier, art fu, se Beowulf, but they also have yit. Michael, I'd be down to talk with Simon Roper. Truly, this is going to sound weird given that it's what I'm doing my PhD in. I don't know that much about Old English literature or linguistics even. I can read it, but I'm relatively new to the field. I actually chose my PhD scholarship in Old English literature in part because it would be a new area and I wanted to explore it more. My greater expertise is much more with Hema and medieval European martial arts. That's the sort of 1400s Italy is the stuff that I know or knew much better before starting. But I'd still be open to talk with him for sure. If someone wants to try and set it up, go for it. Get in touch. I'm open to it. Anyway, so so yit is referring to you two, as in both of you. So it's Brecha and Beowulf that they're talking about. For Valentia, now we sort of have this, we don't have the word Valentia, but like for the sake of pride is what this means. Hunedon Wada, you sort of tested the waters. Onfordol yipe on deopatr aldrum nedron. And for a foolish boast, you risked your lives on the deep water, or onto the deep water. Now, this is quite interesting, isn't it? This is essentially Hunferth, and there's a pun in his name, by the way, the man who's saying this. Hunferth basically means unafraid. And I think it's really interesting. He's basically calling Beowulf out for what we in the present day might call toxic masculinity. He's saying that you're that Beowulf who sort of fought Breca and you went on to the sea. You didn't go out to sea for any sort of good for the community or any necessity, but you went out on to sea for Doljeeper for like a foolish boast, and you risked your lives sort of unnecessarily on the deep water. So this is really interesting. This is like almost two contrasting types of masculinity, like competing with each other in Beowulf. You have Hunferth contrasted with Beowulf. Now, I haven't annotated it yet, but this verse before Hunferth gives his speech explains his motives. So it says that he was basically jealous of Beowulf's journey because he didn't want that any other man ever would have greater fame of Middle Earth under heaven than himself. So he was jealous of Beowulf because Beowulf was more famous on account of Beowulf having done these great deeds or these risky deeds. And therefore, Hunferth is trying to reframe this as not as great heroic deeds, but as unnecessarily risky and like toxic behaviors that Beowulf is engaging in. So it's really interesting. And so that's the end of his speech. And this is a famous line that where he says essentially that I don't think you'll last a night I don't think you'll wait in the hall to endure a whole night of Grendel's sort of fury. And then Beowulf goes off. He shouts back at him, and he gives this long speech about how Hunferth is this pathetic drunkard. It's just like, what you like, sort of worn out by many things. My friend Unfair, this is a very sarcastic bit, my friend, drunken on beer. You spoke about Brecha and you spoke about his journey. Truly, I tell you that I had greater sort of sea strength, sort of hardship on the waves than any other man. So, and then he goes into this long, long speech justifying his actions, because and also honestly boasting. Like Beowulf in this speech is very Trumpian. He's almost like, I went out to sea and it was the best. There's nobody who went out to sea better than me. But I just want to highlight that because I find it so interesting that we've got these contrasting styles of masculinity in the Old English Beowulf. So let us now, having indulged that long-ass distraction, I'm going to start putting in the pretty colours for this. So the first thing I normally do is I put the verbs in bold because the verbs really help you to understand it. So was, that's like was, it's like our modern English word. Sprang, it's like sprang, sort of leapt out. What else? Shall, that's like our word shall. Wirtjan, so if we ignore the y, it's wirtjan is to work, werkjan. And as Simon Roper will no doubt be able to tell you guys, in some dialects of Old English, this would be pronounced not as Yewirchan, but as a Yewerkan or something. I do not know about the dialects of Old English, I'm afraid. So Yewunigan, I think this is, I'm fairly sure Yewunigan is an infinitive verb. Donna we kume leother yelasten. So now that we've done the verbs, I need to highlight I'll first do the subjects. So we're going to highlight all of the words in this sentence who are doing the verbs, doing the actions. So in this case, Beowulf is a subject because he is the person who is being. So Beowulf was, he was the subject. And we're also going to highlight the adjective in the same colour because Old English verbs show that as well. Likewise, blad is the word, I think it's for sword or for rumour. Now, wieder is not an adjective, it's an adverb, so it's like far and wide, essentially. So we're not going to do that. Shetherlandum in this ending means that it's genitive plural, sorry, dative plural. So I'm going to color it like this. I apologize, by the way, to many of my audience, because this is relatively advanced Old English stuff, I think, but hopefully it'll be helpful, and it'll be a record on my channel for the people who want to use it later. So on Ilde, that's going to be in his old age. Von Wieg Kume, Leodoy Lasten. Right. I don't know all of these, I'm afraid, or I'm fairly sure that this is a genitive, Shildes, because you have the S ending like in modern English. And I think Eafera is also a nominative, but I need to check. So let's check. Let's go to the electronic Beowulf. Beowulf was Bremer. So Jack Tier is asking, in the Iliad, is there not different states of masculinity and consciousness embedded in the story? I'll be honest, Jack, I have not read the Iliad. Because I don't like to read translations at all, and that's why I'm not writing a translation below. I'm just putting this annotation to help people read it better, because I've seen so many medieval translations or ancient translations completely change the meaning of things. But I have no doubt that because in the Greco-Roman world there were different types of masculinity that competed against each other. To be sure. Right, so we have Beowulf was, here we are, Beowulf was Bremer. So Blad, that's fame, widespread. Eafera, yeah, I was right. Shelandmin, with goodness. So Gode is dative, and I should have guessed that from the E ending, which usually means, not usually, sometimes means a genitive in Old English. On Father Beam, yeah, so this is a weird one, this here. So we're going to highlight on as blue because on is a preposition, and the noun that it takes as a object is dative. But we're going to color this father as green because it's genitive. Father is a weird one where I don't think it actually has any inflected forms. It's just like it can be almost anything, which is interesting. That hine, fairly sure hine is so that they would remain. Yep. Wait, no, I'm wrong. So that's not an infinitive. That's a subjunctive verb. So hine is accusative after Williasithas. I think that's going to be nominative because sithas could be nominative or accusative. So it could be a subject or the object, but it's nominative plural. The dear companions. Donawikume. And I think this is going to be nominative as well, but I'll do it first and then I'll check, see if I was right. Yelasten. And I think Leother is going to be dative. So it's like having departed his people, I think. Leother. No, I'm wrong. The abandoned people, Leother Yelasten. I see. Right, so. And don't know, we Kume. Okay. Right. Cool. So, Michael asking, I would love to know why the Anglo-Saxons would hero worship a Swedish warrior. So it's a very good question. I truly don't know. Beowulf is rare among the Old English poetic corpus, but it's not completely unique. We have a short fragment of a poem of Wayland the Smith, which is sort of in a similar heroic vein. So there would have been many other poems much like Beowulf surviving, but we don't have record of them. So Breme is like celebrated. Let me see if I can put that up there, maybe. was famous. Yeah, that's good. Blad is fame, so his fame, his reputation. Widely, far and wide. Sprang is sprang or leapt. Eafred, I think, is like war leader. No, offspring. I'm wrong. Eafred. Shield's offspring. Remember, Shield is that guy they talked about earlier who was the self-made man in the Shiralandum. How do we translate that? Southern part of Scandinavia. Okay. I'll just say southern part of Scandinavia. Southern Scandinavia. But one thing actually, Michael, to think about with all of this is that actually a lot of the figures of Old English poetry are actually foreign. You have, you have Helen, you have Judith, you have Christ and Satan. Like, these are all biblical figures, and they are the subject of Old English poetry. Juliana, the famous Old English poem, and Andreas, these are all about foreign saints. Guthlac is one of the only major poems about a saint who is English himself. Hey, Vercingetorix, we're actually studying Beowulf right now. And you're very welcome to help attempt a translation at some of these lines if you want. If anyone going through wants to attempt a translation of this first sentence while I put in the vocabulary for the rest of it, go for it, guys. Feel free to, and I'll let you know if it's right or wrong. I'm very well, Bella. I hope you. I'm very good, Modi. I hope you're doing well as well. He, she, it, shall, a young man, but in, for, to, at, by, or with goodness. So, this stuff I'm doing here for the word gore there, I don't know how visible it is. I might have to present so that it's more visible. But this thing that I'm doing with gode is I'm putting all of the different possibilities it can be, just like with the word sheal, because the same word can mean different things in other contexts. So I want to emphasize that. And out of these, we have to select the right one, right? So with this clause here, swa sheal yenguma gori wirchan. So if we look at our vocab here, Gewirchan is like to perform, to act. So just as a young man should or shall, with goodness, perform. So out of these, it's like he shall, right? Out of these options here. And then with goodness is the most likely one for out of the different meanings it could be. Because you could, I guess, say for goodness. That's one way to translate it. Oh, that actually does remind me. That's an interesting point to bring up, and I will show you guys what I mean. There was a really interesting paper by a scholar called Nicholas Gabe that was recently given at a conference on early medieval England, and he argues that the way we translate a certain verse is actually wrong. Well, not wrong. Yeah, maybe wrong. And we need to reconsider it. And it's a really dramatic part of the story. It's where are we? There's a lot of slicing bit. It took me a while to put all of this together for Beowulf. Come on. I'm gonna lose it. It's one of the only ones down here which is coloured. Fuck's sake. But it's basically his argument is that you can actually, with the grammar, you can read it one of two ways, and you can either interpret it as Beowulf looking upon the sword or the sword looking upon Beowulf. And this might be when he receives Hrunting. Here we are. There we are. Nice. So this is the one. So this verse, Yesech van serwum side bil elsewhere eartenish, edgedum thichti, wiena werthmund, that was wapnakist, but on hit was marder than any mon otter to beurlatje at berden mechte, God on yeatolich, ye anta ye werk. So, or ye werk. So, this bit here, he saw then, among the arms, among the weapons, a sort of battle noble blade. Now, with the grammar of this, the Old English shows whether whether a noun is a subject or an object by changing the ending. But actually, Sinte eadig bil and eald sweard, it's exactly the same if it's subject or object. And Nicholas Gabe argues that actually we should reconsider this. Instead of saying Beowulf saw on the armor, because notice Beowulf's name isn't here. It's implied because in the previous verse, he's fighting with, I believe, Grendel's mother, and this is when he finds the sword right in her cave. Do I practice HEMA? Yeah, I used to. I wrote my bachelor's and my master's dissertations on medieval European martial arts. In particular, I practice Fiore dei Libri, so 15th century Italian martial arts. Does anyone else practice it? Yes, exactly. He got an Ulfeth blade and he went ham. But the point is, so because of the grammar, because the endings of these words can be subject or an object, we could just as well interpret it as the battle noble sword saw Beowulf then among the weapons. And Nicholas Gabe has a really complicated argument for how medieval notions of seeing meant that they would have thought that this was a possibility. Really fascinating stuff. It's a bit over my head, and I think the clip may be uploaded to YouTube at some point soon of his paper that he gave at this conference where he explained this idea. And if he does, I will link it in the description of this video. So, I'll just read the rest of this for you, give you an excerpt. It's a really cool little bit. So you say there and say room city Eddie Bill El swear eight on each. It's them 50. Oh, I've already read it. He saw then among the weapons a battle noble sword, an old Eotinish, was like giant-like sword, no mighty in its edges, or firm in its edges. Worthy meant of heroes, that was dearest of weapons, except that it was greater than any other man might bear to battle. It was good and ornamented, the work of giants, which I find just so cool. This idea that we've got these giants and trolls, and Beowulf is just picking this up. Oh, there's one other one as well. Sorry, I know I'm going through and I'm just being like, these are my favourite verses from Beowulf, but it's really fun. So, Orkenas. Somewhere in here. Aldor. There's so as you guys will know, J.R. Tolkien essentially stole everything from Beowulf. If you read Beowulf, there's so many things, and actually the phrase Hrethel. Oops, no, I need to find the actual thing. The phrase Lord of the Rings shows up over and over again in Beowulf. Ringa. Wait, what? Ringa. Here we are. Ringa Thengel, Lord of the Rings, which I think is just so cool. Ringa Lethel. There's another. Ringa Thengel, sorry. There's. Yeah. Ringa Thengel. Oh, it's just so cool. Like, Lord of the Rings, literally. But then we have Elf. Was it? No, it's Alf. Yeah, it's Alf. Wait, what? Goodness. Oh well. Orc. We have the word orc. Why aren't you showing up? Orcas. That's one of them. Well, so here we are. Flogan. Orcas stondon. This is the word orc, where Tolkien obviously got the fantasy orcs from, and it's like giants or monsters. And I don't know. I just love imagining it as like there were orcs in Beowulf. It sounds so fun and fantasy. Oh, here we are as well. I think so. No, I'm wrong. This is describing the treasures in Grendel's mother's cave. Here we are, right. Thanon untidras eale on walkon, eltenas on ilfe on orkneas, swilche gigantas, va with gode unon lange thrage. Hey him das lean verjeld. So thereafter, the sort of unholy beings, they all woke up. Where are we? Right. So from there, the unholy beings, they all woke up. Eotenas, so this is like Jotun actually in Old Norse, which is like giants basically. Like Jotunheim, for instance, in Old Norse. So we have Jotunas and Ylfe. So Ylfe is elves. On Orkneas, like orcs. And screw this. Like some technical stuffy academic are like, oh, it's not orcs. You translate Orkneas as like monsters or something. Like, no, fuck off. It's orcs. It's orcs. So we have giants and elves and orcs. Such giants which fought against God in a long struggle. He, and that's God. Him that's Lean Varield. He repaid them with a vengeance for this. So yeah, it's just such a fun verse. And you know what? Since we're here, let's put the pretty colours on because it'll be quick, and I already know what to do for this because I've read this so much. On walk on Eotenas. Oops. Yeah. Eotenas. On Ylfe. Now this is an interesting question actually. The idea of the sword being in the man, would that be a description of a man with iron character? Michael, what do you mean by like iron character? So the idea of this Orkney Island of the Orcs, Brian, like, this is again one of those things. The establishment, the academic elites are going to tell you that that's not what it is. But I'm telling you the truth. Yes, Orkney is the island of the Orcs. Dude, but this is why I love medieval. Like, it's so boring if you're like, oh, they thought that like orcs were giants or whatever. It's like, why wouldn't you just have fun and say and translate it as orcs? Why do you have to be boring and be like, oh, monsters or unholy beings or whatever? Oh goodness, lange Thrage. So it's like how, in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as well, there's, sometimes you'll get lines like, and on this and such days, people saw like dragons in the sky. And I'm like, isn't it so much more fun to read the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and be like, there were dragons and have fun with it rather than being like, oh, they saw shooting stars. I know I'm being very much like, we don't need to believe in these stupid Western values of objective truth or whatever, but this is not a CRT episode. We're doing Beowulf right now. So from then or thence, Untidras. I'm actually going to look that up because I'm not certain of Untidras. Untidras is, the evil progeny. Okay. All the evil progenies. That's a really cool one. You all, they awoke. I'm going to put Jotuns actually, because I don't know if you guys you guys probably will be familiar with Jackson Crawford's channel. He actually argues that the word Jotun, which in Old Norse you spell Jotun like that, he actually argues that this word you shouldn't translate as giant because it's misleading. giants, demons maybe. He says you should just make it a loan word, Jotuns, because they have their own specific meaning. And now Old English, we obviously don't have very much, if any, Old English pagan literature surviving to the present day. So Beowulf is like a semi-Christian poem. The extent to which Beowulf is pagan or secular is debated. But at some point, Eothenas and Ylfr probably had some meaning similar to how they're used in Old Norse literature, but we shouldn't assume that it's exactly the same, I should say. So, you know, the elves in Old Norse literature are often these like dark, dangerous beings, and they seem to have some connotations of that in Old English. Like when the prefix Ylfr shows up, usually it's in a negative way, like Ylfad is like a kind of an elf sickness that you can get, and there's a charm that can help you cure it. There's a couple of times though where it's good. So like Judith is described as Ides Alfshinu, like a woman with elven beauty, elf shine, which, by the way, Alfshinu for beauty, that is such a compliment. Like if you want to really like woo a woman, tell her like you have elf shine beauty. Like, damn. So Michael says that the character of the sword in the man, perhaps a description of his strength, being one with the sword. That's interesting. I mean, that's a very interesting question, and I'm sure there's been papers written on that, as to whether Beowulf's character is shaped by the sword, or Beowulf embodies characteristics of the sword. So Tolkien actually, one of the reasons, and I've got his essay on it here, his book, the Monsters and the Critics, and he wrote an essay, that's not Beowulf, on translating Beowulf, there we are. And to my knowledge, it's the only one of these that he actually wrote as a paper. It's a really good introduction to Beowulf. I would recommend reading Tolkien's paper on translating Beowulf. And among other things, he says that the prevalence of certain words, they repeat often, and we have to just use synonyms in Old English. So I'll try and find an example really quick. It's like there's loads of different words in the Old English for hero of some kind. So yeah, here we are, Drichtguma, it's like leader. There's Haleth, which is hero. There's Wig, which is another word for hero. And so Tolkien says, and also we have other vowels as well, like Erken, which is like oaken. Now, modern translators will put in different translations of these if they want to make it consistent, or for their own agendas. Tolkien argued that these adjectives in particular actually tell you things about Beowulf, and Tom Shippey's lecture on YouTube on Beowulf goes into this. He goes into how if you look at the adjectives used to describe Beowulf and look at the other things that they describe, whether in Beowulf or in other poems in Old English, we can see that this word Erken it has connotations of size. So it's implying that Beowulf is big, not just strong, even though many translators would translate Beowulf was Erken, Beowulf was oaken. Many translators might take that and go Beowulf was mighty or strong, but it has other meanings as well. And Tolkien argued that that's why you need to go back to the original and read it in Old English, because you can realize these kinds of things from examining that. And so this has been a long explanation, Michael, to say how with the sword. So it could be that Beowulf is described with some of the same adjectives which are used to describe Hrunting or any other sword that he uses. One could do an analysis of Beowulf to see how that works. I haven't done that. I don't know if that's the case, but you could well have a case for Beowulf having some of the characteristics of a sword. It's a very interesting point. Orcs. Such giants. Those ones against God. We or you all they contended. Thrage, I think, is like struggle, but I'll check. Yeah, hardship, distress. With to fall in with in a long struggle. In long struggle. He, that's God, to at, in, by, with, for them, of this, for this, because of this. Lean is recompense. Recompense, revenge. I, he, she, it's repaid. So, having put the colours into this, you guys can feel free to take a screenshot of that if you want to keep it for personal study. And by the way, the this text, I've linked it in the chat, I'll link it again. You guys can access this document on your own, and you can look at the work that we've done. You can add your own comments, etc. for study. So from there, all the evil progenies awoke, giants and elves and orcs, such giants that struggled with God in a long struggle, or contended with God in a long struggle. He, and that's God, repaid them with vengeance on account of this. So it's one of my favourite lines. It's just so cool. Yeah, massively fun. Right, let's return to the verse we were doing before. We were putting the lines upon this one. Well, I should also make this full screen. Yeah. Oh, that's much better. Much bigger for you guys. Yuwirchean is to work, to act, to perform. Fromum freogiftum. So freogiftum is like gifts of wealth, but I need to check fromum freogiftum. Bold. Okay, so with bold, yeah, fear giving, gifts of treasure. With bold dispensings. In his father's bosom, so that him in age, in old age, afterwards, we, you all, they may remain. So will you see that is like Sitas is our companions, and will is like goodwill, good or willing. The willing companions. When we come, battle comes, yeah. Oops. When, yeah, a battle. I, he, she, it shall come. The abandoned peoples. Nice. We've done that. Go team. Let's take this and put it below. And actually, no, we need to do this one. Goodness. The error was after Kenned. Kenned is a noun, and it means like known or born. Yeong is the subject, and we can tell this by the ending, but also just sort of context. In Yeardum. So this word Yeardum is interesting. We have a cognate in our modern English word yard, and it means like it's an enclosed circle. We have in Old Norse not Old Norse. In Gothic there is the word guards, which is a similar thing. So Lone is the singular object form of the word. God is the subject here. Sender is a noun, a verb, it's he sent. Fulcher is to the people. And then Torfrofre is as a solace. Fyren therfe onjet. So I think this is, I think that's accusative plural, but I need to check. Fyren therfe. It's further up. Fyren, yep, dire distress. Onjet, he sort of experienced dire distress. That here are drugon, so that they endured before. Alderlease, that's leaderless, literally elderless. Lange for a long while. Him, and that's like 2 or 4 him. Fas is on account of this. Now this fas, you'll see it a lot in Beowulf, and it's sort of, you don't often see this, it's used in the same way in other poems, because bear in mind that Beowulf, although it's written down in the 10th century or early 11th century, it has linguistic features that suggest it's actually a much older poem, and this is one of them. So that's interesting, because in later poems, this, which is green, would probably be in blue, because it would do a different thing. Wilderness is of a wander. Wealden is the one ruling. And this word here, Lifrea, so Freya is a word for Lord in Beowulf. Do I think the dragon represents the devil in Beowulf? So I know like Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this with like the dragon representing chaos, and yeah, like crudely, I don't think it's complicated. It's really, I mean, Beowulf is such a complicated poem. I can't give a great answer, but the crude answer is yes, because the dragon represents. One second. I'm going to just quickly finish annotating this, and then I'll go and show you like some of the passages in Beowulf that, because I don't know how I feel about it yet, and I'm trying to make up my mind like as I annotate this. So we'll discuss it. We can have a discussion and a debate about this stuff in Beowulf. Right, let's find this bit about the dragon. So it's way down near the end. I think there's lots of different things that the dragon represents them. Yes, I think this is the one. I think. Yeah, I think this is the one. So this is after Beowulf has fought the dragon, and he's actually died, I believe, or dying. And this is Beowulf's speech. And he's talking to Wiglaf afterwards, and this is describing the stuff in the Dragon's Hall that Wiglaf sees after Beowulf gives his speech, I believe. Or maybe a bit later. Let me just check. No, wait, I'm wrong. It's later. Sorry. Because there are some similar passages. Looking for. I want to actually show you guys the specific bit, because basically there's a scene where Wiglaf looks around the dragon's hoard and sees the specific kinds of stuff that the dragon has collected, and I think it's really significant. I think Beowulf is a kind of Christ figure. That's interesting, and I could be convinced of it. So, Michael, why do you argue for the Christ figure? I can see what you mean in terms of sacrifice, to be sure. Bill Ari showed L. God damn it. Because there's one. there's a really interesting contrast with the dragon's hoard and the hall of Heorot, because Heorot is this place where, and you can see cups mediating this actually, because cups are sort of alive. And actually, I may be able to find it. I don't want to show you guys my Google Docs. Because the annoying thing is right now I'm streaming full screen, so I can't, like, everything I do on my computer is going to show, so. No, that's the last ones. Why are there so many? Sorry guys, I'm trying to find this verse with the cups, because basically cups seem to mediate it. So in Heorot, Werthel, who is Hrothgar's wife, brings around the cups, right? So she causes these cups to move. Actually, I can look for Stondon, yeah. And I think this might be it actually. So Stondon, Stanbogan, Stondon. I can go to the next one. Stanbog. Here we are. Stone archway. Burden and Wilm. I'm just... Where is... Windsor West? No. Because of his struggle with evil on behalf of others. Yeah, so this is true. And there are definitely some ways in which Christ gets warriorized in the... He gets warriorized in the Germanic poetry tradition. So the Old Saxon poem, which is not Old Anglo-Saxon, Old Saxon poem, Heiland, does this as well, where Christ is sort of embodied as a warrior. So that's well possible, even though in many ways Christ, it would otherwise be potentially problematic to argue that Christ, because medieval people don't want to personify the Prince of Peace as a warrior if they can avoid it, but perhaps they are unable to avoid it because the image of a warrior Christ is so important to people, you know? You'll watch it. That's a weird... So we need to go to after he's killed the worm. Folk King. I think this is it. Golden Grunde Grimknes Johanna. Something to say. Yes, here we are. Right. So it's Sean Algilden, Herr Overhorde. Hermanstad. Hord Revian. Yes, here we are. Yeah, so it's built. Right, so I'll zoom in for this. Also, can we get rid of the image? Yeah. Why can't we get rid of this image? I don't care. There we are. Zoom in. So Bill Arya Shod. Here we are. So this is, I believe, after Beowulf has killed the dragon. We finally found it. Sorry, guys. He's telling everyone, or the poet is telling people about the hoard, about all of these glorious items that are in the dragon's hoard. So then I hear such things were plundered from the barrow. The old works of giants by a certain man. He took in his lap, loaded onto his lap, drinking vessels, bunan on discus. Silversdomme seien genom. He took by his own judgment a banner, the brightest of beacons. The sword had previously injured, the edge was iron, it belonged to an old ruler who was for the one who was the guardian of the treasures for a long while. So, yeah. So he stole a bunch of stuff, and the things that he stole are really interesting. He steals drinking vessels, bune, and discus dishes. And I think that... So what does this represent? That the thief who awakens the dragon, he goes into this hall, and he sees a bunch of... the story of the Rood about Christ as a warrior. Yeah, like the Dream of the Rood, you can argue it's got some degree of warriorness. I mean, the Dream of the Rood is quite unique. It's a bit ahead of its time because we don't get like suffering Christ until we get to the Gothic era of medieval history, so the 1200s. But yeah, you can certainly see, I mean, there's blood. There's definitely that in terms of warriorness in the Dream of the Rood. But this bit here is really interesting. Sorry, to go back to the Beowulf bit. What does it represent? That the things the thief finds in the hall are drinking vessels and dishes. When Beowulf goes into Heorot, right? These drinking vessels are mobile, and I'll show you one actually. British Museum. There are some drinking vessels that are really important ones, collection, and the phenomenology of them are actually very important. So Anglo-Saxon, and then image only. Glass is what we'll need. Material, we need gold, glass. Here we are. Done. And look at these. So this is one of them. This is a bag beaker. We also have... There's one that's a bit more interesting to look at because it's like a kind of monster thing. Object name. Beaker, I think that'll work. Here we are. Bag beaker, beaker. Here we are, claw beakers. Look at these. These are really interesting. If I go full screen. Now, these vessels are hard to sit down, and some of them you literally just can't set down on like a table. These ones you sort of can, but if you look at them, they'd be very easily knocked over if the table just shook a bit. So you have to hold them, right? Somebody has to be holding them, and that seems to have been the role of women in many of these stories. This one as well. If you look at this, you literally can't set it down. So if you're at a feast, like with all the warriors, and you're drinking your mead or your ale or your wine in this, you literally can't set it down. So what does that mean? It means that these cups have to be constantly handled by humans and therefore constantly in motion. And we see that cups are mediated by humans in Beowulf. So Wealhtheow gives out the beakers and then take them away again at the feast. And the movement of these cups is a sign of life, of the exuberance of Heorot as a whole. And I think, therefore, it's really significant that what the thief steals from the hall. So the thief is poor. The thief sort of is excluded from this hall society, right? Just like Grendel and Grendel's mother. But the thief is trying to almost regain access to the hall. And he does this by unjust methods. The thief is trying to regain access to the hall not through heroic masculinity such as Beowulf is demonstrating, but by cowardice and theft. He's trying to steal his way into the hall. God damn it, why can't I get rid of this bloody... Stop, go away, I don't want you. Why can't I stop showing it? Views, change view. I only want single. Only, yeah. Finally, thank God. Right. Bill. There we are. Ah! Sorry, I'm gonna go mad. To go back to my rant, I can just find it in my document. Bill. I think it's really significant that, yes, here we are, that the thief steals from the hall. This is the one. Oops. These are the lines. I think it's really significant that the thief steals from the hall cups because he's trying to steal his way into Heorot, into the hall, not with heroic masculinity like Beowulf, or even through blood ties and kinship status like Hunferth. Because notice, Hunferth is not a good character in Beowulf. He's not seen as heroic, but he's allowed to be in the hall. He has a place in Heorot. Whereas, despite his cowardice, this thief is not. He has to go out of the hall and try to find stuff elsewhere. And what does he find? He finds a collection of treasures, very similar to the treasures we see in Sutton Hoo, in these like big pagan burials. So there's religious commentary in here as well. He finds this buried pagan treasure which is dead. He finds these cups which can't have been moving. They can't have. They didn't have anyone going around to fill them with drink and to give them to warriors, because obviously these are cups in a dragon's hoard. So really, I think the dragon in Beowulf can be argued to represent, to some degree, paganism. And so, Michael, your Christ analogy can work quite well here. But also, I think the dragon, in a way, represents unnecessary hoarding of wealth, and particularly like the death of the hall. The sort of this feasting culture dying in Old English literature is a really prominent motif. We see it in The Wanderer, we see it to some extent in The Wife's Lament, we see it in The Seafarer. There are loads of poems which lament the death of the hall, and I think the dragon here is representing this in its entirety, but it's tying in a Christian message. So the dragon is not dead, the dragon is alive, but not able to live and not able to move in the same way that humans are. The dragon is not able to use material possessions, so the cups, like these ones that we saw here, the dragon can't use them in the same way that Werchtheo would. Because look, for instance, that is a good representation, this image that's about to hopefully load up. This image is a good representation of what the cups would have looked like in the dragon's lair. Fucking hell, just on the floor. Why aren't you loading? Rage. Anyway, the cups in the dragon's lair, they would have been empty, dry, dusty, just lying on the floor. Whereas the cups, so the dragon has wealth, but it's not using the wealth. So, whereas the cups in Heorot are moving around, they're circulating, they're filled with humans and laughter and life. And I think that's really significant. I think that the dragon is, and it's a funny coincidence that these claw beakers are very monstrous, which is why I chose them to show on the screen. But I think the dragon represents a combination of two essential terrors, like insecurities that plagued the Anglo-Saxon like imagination. We have the death of the hall on the one hand, because the dragon guards a dead hall, and we have heathenism on the other hand, and they combine in the dragon. The dragon represents sort of the death of the hall because his cups don't move. His cups are stationary, and it's the thing that the thief tries to steal. So there's a third component in the middle, and I know I'm looking crazy right now. Maybe I can draw something in the Google slide to demonstrate what I mean a bit better. So if I take this right, and we'll get rid of these, and we'll draw in three circles. Okay, there are these three. I think there's three insecurities that are getting played out with the dragon in Beowulf, and they're sort of interrelated insecurities. Because that's why we study literature, right? That's why stories and poems and stuff, that's why all this matters, because it tells us something about what we're insecure about, what we're worried about as a culture, etc. So we have, on the one hand, we have death of the hall. Let's make that bigger. On the other hand, we have usurpation or unjust power, and usurpation is a really big theme in Beowulf. Unjust power, and lastly we have we have heathenism. And I think all of these insecurities overlap in the dragon, in terms of what the dragon represents. And there's a reason why it gets mediated. So, death of the hall is because... is because the dragons... So, death of the hall is because the dragon's hoard contains dead things, right? It's like hall. It's got all of the armor and the gold cups. It's got the treasures which in Herod are given to humans and circulating, but in the hall they're still undead. So there's that fear with the dragon. There is usurpation or unjust power, because the fact that these treasures are buried away from human society, and notice that all of the monsters, the dragon, Grendel's mother, and Grendel themselves, they are out of society and they enter society again temporarily to cause trouble. And with the usurpation of power, notice that the thief also is exiled from society, has to leave Herod, goes to the dragon's den and tries to come back with this treasure that he's stolen. So this is a fear that people in society might be able to get power without earning it through heroic masculinity like Beowulf is demonstrating. And it's also linked into heathenism because it's in the earth, it's dead, and because buried treasures with the warriors, like in Sutton Hoo, are more associated with heathenism. Now, the matter of early Christian burial practice in Anglo-Saxon England is super complicated. It's not true that every burial with a lot of grave goods is necessarily a pagan burial. Because there's an early period where there's overlap. But the general rule of thumb is that in the pre-Christian period, especially men would get really lavish burials with lots of treasure, and after the Christianization, they would only be buried with a knife, and they would be facing eastwards towards Jerusalem because of the Christian religion. And in between, it's a bit more up in the air. Beowulf, as a poem, is sort of between paganism and Christianity. But the point is, being buried with a lot of treasure represents heathenism and paganism, and the fact that it's in the ground is really significant, because in the Christian religion of the time, the idea was that non-Christians were corporeal, they were bodily bound, and therefore they would die and stay in the ground, whereas the Christian saved would ascend to heaven. And I think there's real significance in that as well. If you look at how the dragon's lair is described, the dragon's lair is under the ground. It's in this mound, but you have to go beneath the ground. You have to enter into this state of like heathen death in order to access it. Whereas Herod, the hall, is tall, it's mighty, and there's some evidence that Anglo-Saxon poets conceived of heaven as like the dome of a roof, right? So heaven is like a sort of timbered hall for them, and this dragon's lair is this earthen mound which you have to die almost to gain access to, spiritually die in order to access. So I think with the dragon too. Sorry guys, I know I'm like normally like, oh, Beowulf is so boring, there's not much to say about it, but okay. I just realised that I've been like rambling, and I hope that I make some degree of sense here with the dragon. Maybe I should do a separate video about what the dragon represents in Beowulf, and I can use pictures to make my point a bit better. But my point is, I think that the dragon represents these three insecurities all in one. Do you think the dragon's treasure represents the destruction of souls? Good question. No, I don't think the destruction of souls so much. Because I don't think destruction of souls, but there is certainly some degree of that in there. Anyway, with all that, I've actually tuckered myself out a good bit, rambling about the dragon and the treasure. I feel like Jordan Peterson going, dragon. I don't know. Anyway, does anyone have any last questions about Beowulf or about the dragon, or anything that they want to ask about this kind of stuff? And I think I'll wrap it up. Goodness, I went off on that one. Let's look at some more pretty artifacts while I see if anyone has any questions. No, here we are, beakers. So these are the kind of beakers they would have been using in the halls. And again, the fact that you can't set a lot of these beakers down, I think is really, really significant. And I think it's underappreciated. This is something that historians, because a historian who's just looking at the text, right? When it says, God damn it, when it says in the poem that the thief loaded onto his lap all of this stuff, right? When it says that he loaded onto his lap the bunarn, he loaded these like beakers and cups into his lap. No, Michael, you are not interrupting at all. This is fascinating, and I enjoy like talking about this stuff. So in the text, when it says, you know, he loaded these like cups into his lap, a historian who's only looking at the text and the manuscript, we're just left to our own devices to think about what it is. So they may well see that and be like, oh, he took a bunch of cups like this. I mean, they wouldn't have looked exactly like this, but whatever, into his lap. But when we combine a study of history with a study of archaeology, and we look at, well, what are the kind of beakers that they're using in the halls, we can see that actually a lot of these beakers don't look like you can set them down very easily. This one sort of does, but many of them don't have very large bases. Like this one in particular, you literally cannot set down. So we need to think about what that means and how it requires human life and human contact to circulate these things. And therefore we can contrast Heorot, the hall, with the dragon's lair as almost like a heaven and hell kind of scenario. Heorot, if we look in Google Images, I mean, these are just artistic representations, blah, blah, blah. You know, they're not, take it with a grain of salt, they're not accurate. But as a sense, right, this kind of imagery is meant to be showing you, or has connotations of heaven, I think, in Beowulf, whereas the dragon's lair definitely represents something that's dark, underground, dead, pagan, scary, etc. And in this hall, we have these kinds of cups. These kinds of cups are in both places. They're in the dragon's lair and they're in Heorot. But in Heorot, because they have the presence of people and they have this light and this brightness and this height, the cups can move around and they can share drinks and they can foster social relationships between people. Whereas in the hall, these cups are still and they can't move. And because they can't move, because there's no society there, there's no relationships that are being formed, there's no love, there's no Christianity even in this dragon's lair. So in a way, actually, we can read. So Michael, you think that you asked if I think the dragon's treasure represents the destruction of souls. I don't think it represents the destruction of souls. I think the dragon's treasure actually represents a statement of what money is good for in early medieval England. I think these treasures that we see in the hoard, I think the poem of Beowulf is telling us that these treasures are only valuable in so much as they are tools with which we can build our social relationships, and that use of these tools, either unjustly, so to gain power in ways which aren't socially approved, such as stealing treasure to get ahead, right, as opposed to earning treasure by fighting in battle. Use of this treasure in unjust ways is ruinous, will lead to the downfall of society. And as to the downfall of society, there's so much we could say about whether they think that the mead hall is always doomed to failure. These are the kinds of questions I would go over with my students in class, and it's a whole thing. But I rambled for so long now. I'm going to probably call it a day, unless anyone has any further questions about what I mean by all of this, symbolism and such like this, or if you want me to do a separate video ranting about cups in Beowulf, because I could do. Right. I'll Actually, well, yeah, no, I'm not going to go through all of that now. I'm a bit too tired. I'm gonna go take a break. I'm gonna go to lunch actually. Um, yes, thank you guys. It's been great having you guys. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, and I will go through and try and answer them to the best of my ability. Oh, one last thing. So a couple of other things just to round up. So this document, if you want to read over what we've done and use it for study, because this document that I'm creating, it's not a translation. I do have my own translation that I've made of Beowulf, but I'll need to modify it. This document is made so that you, if you're studying Old English, you can go through and you can read it a little bit more easily. You can understand what the words are doing. You can look them up. So if any of you want to do that in your own study, you can do so. I'm going to put the link again in the description. Sorry, in the chat so that you guys can do that. I'm also going to link you guys to my Discord server so that anyone who wants to can join, because oftentimes I'm actually just hanging out in my server and I'm doing it live like this. So I work and I chill, but people can come and pop in and ask questions. So there's that. Feel free to use the electronic Beowulf. Oh yeah, electronic Beowulf as well. I know I'm just spamming the chat with links. I apologize. One last one. The music we've been listening to in the background, I don't even know if you've been able to hear it, but the music in the background is by my friend Arang, a really good musician. You should check out his Bandcamp. I love it personally. I feel it fits. It's nice to have in the background while studying medieval stuff. I know of the subject. Am I familiar with the Epic of Gilgamesh? No, Jack, I'm not, because personally I don't like to read translations. I don't trust translations, so I don't read any like medieval or ancient texts unless I can read it in the original language. So I've read bits of the Aeneid because my Latin's okay-ish for the Aeneid, but I haven't read much like classical literature. And I've read Beowulf, but because it's my field, but yeah, I've not read too much else. I'm reading some of the Old Norse sagas actually because I'm studying Old Norse. It's quite fun. But yeah, that's just my personal thing. So awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's been awesome, and I hope you'll have a good day. Bye, everyone.